We are headed over to the Hawaiian Godfather of Ava at Johnston's house. So he's gonna explain to us all about Ava, about how he found it in the jungles of Hawaii with his buddies, and what he expects to see for Ava in the future. Well, first off, thanks for actually allowing us to do this, because you're like my hero.
Yeah, well, you say.
Oh, come on. Anyways, so we're here at your lovely home with your beautiful plants, and I want to learn more about your history and how you came to Hawaii and how you got involved with Ava.
I had a working visa in Australia, Northern Australia, that started in the late 70s, early 80s. So I lived and worked in Australia. But on my way to Australia, I had a layover in Hawaii. This would have been 79, 80. And I walked through a botanical garden in the Honolulu International Airport, and I just said to myself, I got to end up in this place somehow. And then I went to Australia and worked, and I came back through Hawaii, and by then I had made a connection with a person that grew coffee in the other side of the island, this island. And so I had the job opportunity there. This is before I met Helen.
This is the Big Island.
This island, yep, Big Island, Hawaii Island. He lived in, he grew coffee up in Keahomauka, up near Holualoa, above Kona, above Kailua Kona. And so I had the opportunity to live there. He had coffee shacks, and I think I was 27, going on 28 at that time, because I remember I celebrated a birthday at that farm. And I went back to Florida sometime around 1981, 82, and with the intention of coming back here and going to the University of Hawaii in Hilo College of Agriculture. That was my goal. And ultimately, I met Helen, who we got married and came back here. Actually, we rented a house right here in Pepekeo, starting in '85. I got a connection with this person in Waipio Valley, who was actually an artist. He was a fairly well-known local artist, Joe Oxspring, and he owned and lived in Waipio Valley. And I started going down there, and it was him, Kelly Lou, Kia Fronda, Harrison Kanikoa. We all became friends. And these are old-time Hawaiian men, and one of them, I think, two of them worked for Waipio Valley Shuttle. Kia was a kalo farmer and cultural practitioner that lived further back in the valley. But all were friendly, welcomed us with aloha, as long as, with Kia, as long as if you were going to go past his house on the old road, which was an old trail, to get further in the valley, you ask his permission, because he actually owned part of that trail. Physically, his property went into that trail. So he didn't like it when people just went back. No problem if you stopped and talked to him and asked him. I actually wrote a story about this experience in Waipio Valley and sent it to Alex Russell, and talked about Kia and going over to Kia's house, and all of his friends would hang around drinking beer, and Kia would be drinking Ava, talking story. And I would, at that time, I was chewing Ava root. By then I had already gone back into the back of the valley, way back, long ways. Not, when you stand on the beach in Waipio and you look at the valley, you think, oh, well, there's the valley. But in reality, that valley snakes back into the Kohala Mountains a long ways. And you get to a point on it's sort of like a Jeep trail. And once you got off of this Jeep trail and went onto the old Hawaiian trail itself, everything changed. There was native plants, there was ava growing all over the place. There were huge ava patches, massive ava patches, just, native butterflies, like, it was just like a different world, because you were going from where people could drive to where people could no longer drive, they had to walk. And that's when I discovered a patch of Ava mahakea, and also this guy right behind me, Ava papa elieli. Chewed some lateral roots and just experienced a feeling of really deep peace and relaxation, and everything seemed just fine. And again, as I've said often, I swore then it was my imagination. I thought, this is just my imagination, but obviously it wasn't.
Do you still chew ava root?
No, my teeth are just not as good.
Is it because of your teeth or because of other reasons?
Mostly my teeth.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because chewing is very effective.
Yeah.
Very effective.
For fresh root, of course.
Fresh root. Although I know people that suck on dried root.
Yeah.
So it's obviously the way it was originally done.
Yeah.
And that's when, I actually started propagating ava at this botanical garden. I say that way because it's just like a few miles south of us. Yeah. But I propagated ava there starting around 1985, and then when I stopped working there about 87, and I started propagating on my own and started a nursery that ultimately became a Leah Point Ava Nursery. Stock plants grown right on this piece of property here. And then in '94 is when I met Jerry Konanui. I had already a fairly well-established nursery and was selling at the Hilo Farmers Market $5 for a little 4-inch ava plant.
Back then, ava was known but not well known.
Exactly.
And you were a bit of a pioneer of, realizing how special this plant was. I have to imagine that even though you worked at a nursery, even though you understood plants and how they operate, that there were difficulties in farming it or propagating it. Do you remember some of the early days of what that was like, and any frustrations that came out from that?
It was like you started with a stalk, and you put it in the pot, but that's really not a good way to do it. We really refined this propagation method. Jerry and I, and Jerry Ooka, to be fair. Jerry Ooka was also actually the only living, besides me, member of, except Joel McCleary, he's still alive, of the Association for Hawaiian. But we came up with the sphagnum method but we say we came up with it, but sphagnum grows all over the place in bogs. So I can imagine sphagnum probably grows in the Marquesas. And it's because when you pack ava cuttings in sphagnum moss, it can live, I've had it live 7 weeks in a sealed box. And that cutting has come out fresh with roots. So it can live a long time. So it's conceivable that the Hawaiians, when they brought cuttings with them as a canoe plant, might have had them packed in sphagnum moss. Wow. Who knows?
Yeah.
So we started with several nodes in soil, then we went to sterile media, then we went to 2 nodes, which works really good. But then we went to single node cuttings, and you know why we went to single node cuttings? Because there wasn't that much ava.
Yeah.
There really wasn't. And wasn't that much stock plants. And so single node cuttings with sphagnum moss, that was the way to go. And because we know sphagnum moss is resistant to fungus and bacteria, so it's the best propagation that, except possibly for time mist system and perlite. But if you're low key and you're working on a budget and you don't have a time mist system and you don't maybe even have running water, you can use moist sphagnum, and it's a great way to propagate ava.
Do you remember any times where it it went poorly, your farming?
Before I initially started on this piece of property just on a table in the shade. And if we got enormous amounts of rain, then things would, we didn't so much have FOMA then, which is a fungus disease, as damping off, root rot, too much rain. When I rented right near here, huge hoop house, a shade house that had a plastic roof, and I had a time mist system in there. And that's when I really started propagating in earnest, because you could do the sphagnum method, you could do the time mist method, and you could control the weather. So that's ideal, because even with shade cloth, if it rains too much, it can be detrimental. So too much rain and not being able to control your environment, you're still going to be able to propagate. You're still going to get a lot of takes, but you won't get 99, 100%, which is what you really want to try to get. I hate to waste cuttings.
Yeah. It's too valuable to waste them.
Particularly then. Yeah, and we didn't, we were still finding cultivars. Jerry's the one that found Opi'i cow, and I have never found that one described really in any of the collections that the real pioneer of this was this Joel Lau with the Nature Conservancy. He was doing it before me, but he was doing it as a Hawaiian heritage project within the Nature Conservancy. And he didn't obviously get as obsessed with it as me, but he was certainly the inspiration, along with a good Hawaiian studies friend of mine, Ka'olani McGuire. She really inspired me, as did Joel, to start this nursery and start distributing ava plants and getting them out there.
Mm-hmm. How do you, obviously kava is very special to you, or ava is very special to you. How do you look at it? Why do you think you were drawn to it, and why has it had such staying power in your life?
I think of ava coincidences. They always show up. There's something, the older I get, the more I'm convinced that this plant has, may sound odd to some people, but I think it has some kind of a consciousness. I think it knows that if it has an ally, because obviously the plant wants to live, it wants to perpetuate itself. If it has this consciousness, it wants to perpetuate itself. And if it sees a person that's going to perpetuate it, maybe it helps it along. An example of this, and maybe in a mystical way, maybe there's a little mysticism here. That weekend, when I took my trip into the back of Waipio and first discovered this ava, Monday, when I got back to work at the Botanical Garden, I came across a guest, and his name was Aaron Allen. I still have his business card. He was a scientist from the mainland. And, now keep in mind, this was right after the weekend when I had first learned about ava. So this Aaron Allen, Dr. Aaron Allen, comes up to me in the Botanical Garden as a guest, and I'm a worker there, He goes, do you know about this plant called kava? Do you know anything about it? He says, because my company sent me to Fiji to study it. And pretty bizarre.
What are the odds, huh?
And I did correspond with him for a while, and then a few years, he was working with ava. He went to Fiji. He was doing some research on it, and then he got sent. His company sent him to Saudi Arabia for some reason. I never heard from him again.
They're not growing kava over there.
No, it was something completely separate. So I thought that was pretty remarkable. And throughout the decades of my working with ava, these coincidences show up, and it just really makes you wonder. Like September 1st, 2021, I believe it was the very first Zoom meeting I ever had. And who was that with? It was with that blasted Doug Ballantyne of the Food and Drug Administration Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition, explaining to me that he didn't know exactly why kava had not been accepted by the FDA, although they supported it being passed as a Codex Alimentarius safe food, but the FDA wasn't going to And as my witness at that same meeting was Alex Russell. So I'm not making it up that Doug Ballantyne didn't know. He says it's some safety concern, and I'll find out and I'll get back to you.
So let's roll back the tape a bit. Ava has been consumed for thousands of years by millions of people, and people have been consuming it safely for a long, long time. In the late 90s, early 2000s, there was a big boom in Kava, right? There's a lot of nurseries, yours included, right?
Right.
And people got very excited about it because it's a great plant. Goes to Germany in an extract form made by a company of dubious rapport.
I knew them. They came here, Schwabe and Finselberg. And they made, what they made really, we really haven't gotten this concept yet. It wasn't traditional Ava, obviously.
No.
But it's still, the line is blurred there, particularly with the FDA. Because Kava is Kava, whether it's a little capsule pill, which is just extracted Kava lactones, maybe with a few other things, as opposed to a bowl of juice from the root and the stump that's been mixed with a little bit of water and strained. Big difference.
So just to be clear, right, what you're saying is that the FDA does not distinguish between an extract of Kava plant and the Kava plant itself being consumed on its own, maybe with some water.
To be more precise, because technically the Kava beverage itself is an extract. It's an extract because, water.
Sure.
But we're talking acetone, ethanol. I've heard of other solvents that are very harsh are used to pull out these Kava lactones, right?
Yeah.
And even CO2 that's not a harsh solvent, but it's still a very, very concentrated form of the Kava lactones.
Yeah.
You could kind of compare it to what used to be called NoDoz. The truckers used to pop NoDoz, which was caffeine pills.
Yeah.
As opposed to a cup of coffee.
But you would never say that a caffeine pill is a cup of coffee,
You
right?
would not. So why does the FDA have it in their minds? Why don't they differentiate traditional Kava beverage from these acetone, ethanol extracts that are just fragmented Kava lactones in a paste or a tincture?
It doesn't make sense. They treat Kava separately than they would coffee or tea or pretty much anything
Because
else.
in reality, it would be regardless, they should. There's a thing in the FDA's rules, regulations, called the 1958 clause, where if something was used as a food safely before 1958, then it is already a safe food. And the traditional Kava beverage certainly has that distinction. Not so much the pills and the extracts. They don't have that history.
Yeah. So someone sitting in Washington, D.C., writing legislation saying that something that is a food, if it was safely consumed prior to 1958, likely had no idea that Kava even existed, right?
It would not surprise me.
So when you have, fast forward many, many years, and we're sitting in a situation where Kava is a food, it is safe, it's been safely used for thousands of years. The FDA does not actually show that it is a food, even though its own rules that Congress has set for it specifically delineates Kava as a food. And yet we have to treat it as a dietary supplement.
And we should throw in that by food, it's the same thing as a beverage, food beverage.
Yes. Right.
And I don't really understand it. I don't understand why they don't listen, why they, they did that 2020 report, which was the same year that the Codex Alimentarius was officially published. It didn't really go into effect till 2021, and yet the FDA, and I don't really, I don't quite know what to do about it, other than what I've been doing. I mean, Jerry and I went in 2011, we went and visited the late Senator Akaka, and he actually approached the FDA. And I have a letter, but they stuck to their guns then, and Jerry and I just, at that time, we didn't have enough knowledge and background to counter their argument. They were saying, well, there's something in kava that's messing up people's livers. And it's just so bad that as I say, I still have the letter, but had we known what we know today, we're much more educated today. And, you know, we got Dr. Schmid, you know, Willie. We have so many, we have every single, virtually all of the scientific papers that deal with kava as anti-cancer start out with, kava is a traditional beverage of the South Pacific for 2,000 years. And by the way, in our studies, it didn't hurt your liver at all, you know.
Yeah. And the FDA's own databases, their CARES database and their FAIRS database, they, you know, in the past 20 years, in the CARES database, for example, there have been almost 40 cases of issues involving health in general with kava. 40 cases out of how many millions upon millions of doses being consumed over the past 20 years. Now, if you go look at Sprite, the canned carbonated beverage, it has almost the exact same amount of reports of health issues. So remarkable. I don't know what we're doing here, why we have to talk about it like this.
It could be because it's nebulous, it's void to the FDA. It's like, these Pacific Islanders, what do they know? Maybe that's what the FDA is thinking. Because I do know, and Alex Russell is my witness, at this Zoom meeting with Doug Ballantyne of Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition, I said, well, you know, New Zealand has a regulated as a safe food. It's a food. And this Dr. Ballantyne looked at me and through the Zoom thing, you know, and he says, New Zealand? And he just laughed. He laughed out loud.
Just a tiny piddly country. What do they know, you know? They don't have anyone qualified to make these decisions, right?
And, you know, also at that meeting was Kristen Kendricks of the USDA Codex Office. So there were two witnesses, so, besides me and Alex. Yeah, it's like maybe that's it. Maybe the University of the South Pacific means nothing to these FDA guys. It's a mystery to me. Is it a colonial thing?
And maybe they just don't understand it, you know?
It's possible they don't understand it, and maybe, you know, you know, as you know, I've approached Hawaii State U.S. Representative Jill Tokuda, and her legislative assistant is got a meeting scheduled this summer with the overseer of the FDA, and you know, maybe they'll get to the bottom of it. Maybe it's just a simple thing that they haven't heard, or they don't give credibility to folks like us. Right. I don't know.
Well, it looks like your liver's doing okay.
Yeah, back, you know, I used to do regular blood tests. I mean, I know we don't talk about that, but, you know, my liver was always fine. And there was a period of time when I had to go on a medication that was definitely bad for your liver. And my doctor said, okay, you're going to be on this medication for 6 months. So every 6 weeks, I want you to have a blood test to test your liver. And I never stopped drinking Ava, and I took this medication. My liver was fine.
That's good news. Good news.
But we know that, you know, we hear people's liver reports.
Yeah, no, not a problem.
Indeed, in China, 3 different universities have tested yangonin, the cavalactone, as being beneficial to fatty liver disease.
Okay, there you have it. Well, so you obviously have been very influential in the Hawaiian Ava world for so long. Where do you want to see it go?
My first priority, obviously, is getting it recognized federally in the United States as a safe food, a beverage, and that the FDA should recognize its important history and its positive health benefits. And but my ultimate gain is, and the ultimate gain for all of this, is to get more Ava growing. I would like to see all people growing it in their backyards, making their own beverage. Not, Hawaiians, obviously. I sort of prioritize them because they technically invented the Hawaiian cultivars, but I don't stop there. I think it's obviously good for everybody. Jerry Konanui used to say, Ava is a plant that is good for people. He didn't say it is good for these people, but not those people. It is good for people. And it is. The National Cancer Institute has it on their website now as being able to prevent certain forms of cancer. What? And by the way, that same website, they say, and it's been safely consumed, by Pacific Islanders for a millennia.
Yeah. Yeah. So you want to see it just...
More people grow it. I want to see more farms. And part of the reason is I'd like to see if we get some more somatic mutations of cultivars that might have been lost. Up at the Talanoa, I brought a picture, and I have it upstairs, of a variegated leaf Ava, which showed up at a 20-acre Kava farm a few hundred yards from here, out of Mahakea. And they propagated it, and it grew variegated. Beautiful yellow splotches and green. And a lot of people would look at that and they say, oh, well, it's just got a virus. But we had a plant pathologist at that time at UH that tested it and said, no, it is a somatic mutation. There is no virus. So there is a lost cultivar. And this was just like right before the big liver thing, and that farm went under.
Yeah.
And that cultivar got lost, although I have pictures of it.
It had yellow splotches on the leaves?
Beautiful, deep yellow and green on the leaves. Yeah, if I could remember, I'll show you the picture of it.
I'd love to see the picture because I actually saw earlier yellow splotches on one of the plants over there, but I wasn't sure if it was I just assumed it was like dehydrated or something. I don't know.
This was very distinctive, very ornamental.
Okay.
So I guess my point in all this is that the more people that grow Ava or Kava, the greatest chance that the plant is going to survive, because as we know, it cannot produce seed.
Yeah.
Now, we know that it can propagate itself. That's why we still have the old patches. But what is the potential of it being all by itself out in the wild nowadays and propagating itself? It should be in cultivation, and it should be propagated a lot. I think the plants like to know that if they're going to be harvested, they're going to become 100 new babies, and they're going to grow. Obviously, if the plant has a consciousness, and I think that there's something there, and it's like they want to continue to exist. So that's the reason that we want it to be classified as a safe food, so people use it more and it gets grown more. It's good for the plant and it's good for people.
So it's very interesting to hear someone like you talk about Kava in a mystical way in a present tense. How do you feel about Kava itself? It has somewhat of a consciousness. Do you think that Kava talks to you in a way?
In a way, the plants definitely tell me, if there's something wrong. Obviously, if the plant, an example is right now we've got El Nino, and it's a drier than normal time. Today we got great cloud cover. This is much more typical of typical Hilo weather right here. Yeah. But more often than not now, it's just blaring sun all day. So, I think I'm doing all this shade cloth now because, for the benefit of making it a little easier on my plants. It's not ultimately necessary. The plants will still grow, but I think they do a lot better. And I think my plants convince me of this. Because I feel when they don't look good, I sort of feel it myself. I feel like, I got to do something to hydrate them or to make them feel better. So I believe me, I've got a very analytical mind. So going this far and thinking of it as somewhat mystical, something like the plant and the person is connected, is a real stretch for me, but I'm pretty much convinced. And when you think about it, Ava, was created by people. So there is a link there that you wouldn't necessarily see in, a hybrid apple.
Yeah.
Because according to the environment that that's in, it may mutate to something else, it may change. And then if a person or a group of people like that change, the effect it has on them, then they perpetuate it. If they don't like it, they cast it aside. So right there is an obvious link. Something like Ayanna Runnels was talking about, the Kohala Center guy, was talking about the Ava DNA is the DNA he can touch, is the DNA of the Ava of 1,000 years ago. I mean, it is, and it's a DNA that involves these native people.
Well, they've helped your life in a lot of different ways, obviously, and they've helped direct it in a way that
no question
has benefited you a lot. And it obviously seems like quite a symbiotic relationship.
Symbiotic is good. Cultural artifact would be good in reference to the indigenous people that created it. I mean, it's a human artifact. I think Lebeau maybe used that phrase. It's a human artifact.
Because this would not be here without thousands of years of families propagating it and picking the best of all of their crops, right?
Yeah, Joel McCleary, one of the founders of our association, he used to be at Putwahoku. He had a fun theory. It was that women were behind it all, so they could tolerate the men.
My wife would agree.
I like that.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier about how women would come to you at these farmers markets. They would say, "Oh, I used to have to chew this for my uncle." And that link from back in the old times of Hawaii to now exists because of those stories.
It exists, and obviously it was in their memory, so it was unbroken. And I think Kavika Winter's master's thesis gets into this somewhat. I've certainly put together a document that finds all these links and put them in 2 or 3 pages. So it was never completely given up, even though, alcohol is very much dominant in Hawaii and with a lot of Hawaiians. But you've got these jewels in the crown, like Kanaka Kava over in Kailua Kona, where Native Hawaiian owned, and they're trying to get the word out. They're trying to inspire people to drink this beverage more. So that unbroken chain, it really was getting popular before the liver scare. There was a National Public Radio interview at the height of our Hawaiian Ava Renaissance, done by Heidi Chang, and it's 8 minutes. And I just came across it the other day, and I sent it to Jimmy. It has me. It has the guy at the sugar company that had the 20 acres over here interviewed. It interviews the guy that did a lot of the analysis, Mel Jackson, back in the analysis of the Hawaiian cultivars. And it also has an interview. It interviews the first bar that we had in Waikiki that we know of, called Hale Noa. So, it was like there was no liver issue at all. And it was like going up, it was escalating exponentially. There were so many farms. John Bennett had a farm up the coast, owned by Germans, but still, he was the manager.
Sure.
In fact, it was John Bennett that brought Mike Munsell here. I was just looking that up, December 2016.
I think that's the picture that I have hanging up in my office.
Yeah, and then from then he bought the 5 acres near here, and the rest is history. I've found cultivars, but I never found a cultivar of Ava that wasn't already known. I think Opi'i cow, which is this black Ava with spots, Jerry found that. That hadn't been known before. And Joel Lau found the Hanakapiai. So I think I found lots of rare cultivars, but they were all that had been, that we knew existed. I did find Pana Eva, but Genesis Lilloy knew all about that one. Yeah, although it wasn't called Pana Eva, it's called short internode green, and Genesis gave it the name Pana Eva. Because why are these names? Why are some of the names place names, as to where we found them, as opposed to the traditional Hawaiian name? Is because so much has been lost. A lot of these has been lost. Maybe someday, we'll come across what the real Hawaiian name might have been. Like Hanakapiai now has an official name, which I cannot pronounce.
Where do you think we're going to get those names? Because I know a lot of them came from oral histories, songs,
Well, right now
poems.
they're translating a lot of Hawaiian language newspapers that had never been translated before.
Oh, wow.
It's also possible that they'll get them just by better observation and somebody really doing the research. Right now, back in the day, we had lots of university students, lots of university professors that did a lot of research. Not so much right now. But hopefully we'll get back into it. And you could do the research particularly if you were a native speaker, and you might be able to come up with another name for Pana Eva, cultivar, that maybe link it back. There's all kinds of stories about the god Maui stealing Ava from somebody, from the gods and bringing it to the people. But I think that the most important thing about Hawaii is Ava, besides being obviously important enough for them to truck it across thousands of miles of ocean to bring from, Marquesas, is its uses were ceremonial, religious. Its uses were for ali'i pretty much all the time.
Ali'i are the chiefs.
The chiefs. The kahunas, who advised ali'is, were like shamans, teachers, knowledgeable. They would drink the ava and have vivid dreams and advise the ali'i. But most important, it became available to the common people, the commoners, for a beverage to drink at the end of the day, not necessarily ceremonial. Jerry found a very close relative. I think Gladys talked about this at the Talanoa, that years later he found out that he'd get home from work and he'd make his ava by himself out in the shed, drink some and come in. I found many accounts of families doing that, Hawaiian families visited by missionaries, and the family guy, the head of the family goes, you mind if we drink some ava before dinner? And no problem, the missionary would say, but he didn't participate. But all the kids would drink, the women would drink, the men would drink, then they'd have their dinner. This is talked about a bit in Kavika Winter's master's thesis, where you would, so traditional uses would be, around a big circle maybe, drinking all night is one thing. Kahuna advising the ali'i drinking on their own. But most important, in my opinion, is the commoners, like me. At the end of your workday, you can drink some ava and you can relax and have a good night's sleep. Kavika talks about it being a family thing, and the family would tell stories or talk about their workday and then have dinner and go on, about their evening. So it had multi-uses. You will find, and this is also in Kavika Winter's master's thesis, folks saying, oh, no, that's medicinal, that's strictly medicinal. You can't just drink that. They're convinced of that because they go to the bars.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not comparing ava to alcohol. It's a completely different experience. But the similarity would be, people have their cocktails at the end of the day. Well, people should be drinking their ava at the end of the day. I don't want to get into alcohol, but, recent studies are finding more and more it's going to hurt your liver.
Mm.
And absolute positively, no question about it. Even a small amount.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope that kind of answer your question. If I was describing its use to somebody, it would be that way, that it has a multifaceted amount of uses.
How does it feel?
Well, Jerry used to say it feels like a massage from the inside out. I don't like massages, but as I said, to me, it is a feeling of well-being and that everything is just fine. And when you're ready to sleep, you can sleep wonderfully. So relaxation, well-being. I hate to use the word euphoria, but you do feel like everything's just fine.
Yeah. How often do you drink kava?
I've been drinking, I drank fresh Ava every night from 2002 to about 2016. Now I pretty much drink dry Ava powder. I still have fresh in the freezer, but my reason for that is I really like dried Ava. People, there's a lot of hype about fresh, and maybe physically, maybe it's better for you, I don't know. But I really like dried Ava as well, and for me it's a matter of work. For me to drink fresh Ava, I have to harvest all or part of a plant, grind it up, put it into a bag, freeze it. And I've been drinking Ava every night since about 1990. Well, 94 to about 2000, I was chewing the root, but I don't make any exceptions. I drink it every night. I broke my ribs once, and I might have skipped a few nights, but every night.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about excessively. I mean, a few cups, just to take the edge off of my memories. The best story is really a good one. Two good stories, really. One with Jerry in Nanavali, in a remote area of Nanavali on this island. There was a crater. A crater is an area where the lava hasn't destroyed everything, and you're down literally in a crater, and there's a really cool forest down, like a fairyland forest. But to get down there, we had to tie a rope to Jerry's truck. And who was the one that rappelled down? And the funny thing is, I'm rappelling down, and I'm saying, oh, this is easy. This is no problem. Jerry's at the truck. And I was looking for the red Ava, the elusive red Ava, which doesn't exist. But, I mean, you can find Ava that's sort of red, and it's just a fashion of Papa Eli Eli. So anyway, I'm looking around down there, yelling up at Jerry, I don't see it, I don't see it, And then I wanted to come out to climb back up. And I had the hardest time. As I'm going up, I'm rappelling, and Jerry's yelling, don't worry, Ed, I'm still here. I'm not going to go anywhere. And, because I'm going up vertically, and even though I was young, it was really hard. Really hard. I thought, he was going to have to go get a helicopter and get me out. But I just slowly kept coming. And once in a while, Jerry would yell down, don't worry, Ed, I'm still here. And, I came up empty-handed. But here's a good one, though, with Joel Lau. Joel Lau, this is another really good story. I always found this really fascinating. Joel Lau is of Chinese descent. And when I knew him, he was a stoic, extremely intelligent. He could look in a field glasses at a cliff way off and say, oh yeah, there's this, there's this, there's this. He was, and we did some expeditions into Waipio Valley to get Ava. And one of our expeditions, walks, we're in an area known as the Chinese camp. And, of course there's nobody, there's just no human being. And we came across what is known as a seep. There's a big cliff, and then there's a seep. And it's like water trickling down. And Joel, without saying anything, he looks at that water, and he starts going up. He starts climbing this ridge, and we're grabbing at vines, climbing up. We climb up about 300 feet, and we fall onto an an old Hawaiian trail. Beautiful Hawaiian trail. So it's like you're going up, and then it levels off. And we're in the middle of this huge ava patch. And a very rare banana is growing there, a Hawaiian banana. And the ava that was growing was actually Papa Eli. But I remember I'm getting cuttings, and Joel looks down, and it's just like this abyss that we've come up. And he goes, "This is not a safe place to be." But the fact is, he saw that water coming down, and something clicked in his mind that there's probably going to be something up here. He was just so good. And there it was. Maybe it was a camp of a kahuna. Maybe, who knows what it was once upon a time. But obviously somebody had lived there. There was stone wall, and there's this beautiful ava patch, and this kind of a rare, apparently a rare banana. He was real good at bananas. I'm not. But I thought that was a pretty good story.
Yeah. Do you think he realized that, the running water was exactly where they would plant ava?
Yep. And it was like not a waterfall. It was like a seep, and it's coming down, and it's coming down a long way. So there would probably, if we'd looked carefully up there, I'm sure we would have come across a spring. And there's all this ava.
Yeah.
So that was very interesting that he had that insight, And we got another example of Papa Eli. Well, you're drinking something that was created by people over thousands of years, according to their preferences. So, when there was a mutation, they would take that mutation, grow it out, and if they liked the beverage made from that mutation, they would keep it. And as the years go by, we refine the profile of cavalactones and the profile of everything. If we get less double-bonded cavalactones, you could talk about that scientifically, that we're drinking something that is an invention, but it's also a really refined invention of people. But I would guard against too much sacredness. Sacredness is part of it, but again, it was multifaceted. It was sacred, ceremonial, but it was also a revered beverage at the end of the workday for the farmer and the fisherman and the guy that worked hard and the woman that worked hard, and a chance to connect with their family with stories and so forth, which we know that when you drink kava, the stories just kind of pour out, So I would say you're drinking to something that is obviously connected historically to indigenous people all over the Pacific. It's their invention. But I wouldn't, Jerry used to do a pule, a little prayer when drinking. I made it clear that my prayer is malama the plants. Take care of the plants. Keep them going. Help them to thrive. That is my little prayer. So I don't go for, tossing a little bit to Pele or whomever. I go with revering and honoring the plant. So for that, we don't have this. We don't have the beverage. Yeah. Think about it. What did I first see in my history? The first thing I saw was the plant. I didn't know anything about the powder. I didn't even know about the drink. Well, Joe told me that they used to drink the root of the beverage, but the first thing I saw was the plant. And the first thing I did was chew the root. So I relate to the plant. And I think a lot of people, when you think about it, ava is something they get in the mail. Or they go to a kava bar.
Yeah.
Or it's a package they get in the mail.
Yeah. It's very disconnected.
So my My thing is the plant.
People need to know what the plant is, and where it comes from,
Where it comes from, and that it needs to be perpetuated. It appreciates being perpetuated.
Yeah. That's beautiful. You know what's interesting that I've never really picked up on until now is, you know, you stress that yes, it's religious, yes, it's ceremonious, but also the common man drinks Ava. And in the same way, you know, if you look at the old world of, you know, Europe, right, and how they would consume wine, well, they consumed wine as a family. They also, you know, had mass, and, you know, it was their sacrament, right? And so,
wow, I hadn't thought of that.
Ava is really not that dissimilar from that. It is the South Pacific sacrament and common drink.
Well, you know, Vincent always compared vintages and different regions, like of wine growing and kava growing.
Yeah.
So that's a good point. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'd never made that connection before. Yeah, I think, you know, when I drink Ava or Kava, it depends on where it comes from. Certain varieties to me, you know, you look at more Vanuatu or Fijian varieties or Solomon Islands, they're far more sedative. You know, that you really melt into your chair, your couch, you just relax and not really, you know, there's a lot of just very calm feelings. And I think once you start to, you know, get out of maybe Fiji and start to venture into Tonga or Samoa or the Hawaiian Islands, you get a lot more of that sense of well-being.
Which could be the Kavain. Not that I like the idea of fragmentation, but...
Yeah. I think that I get a really good sense of well-being and a sense of helping to understand where I'm at in the world.
Yes, yes, yes.
I think it helps really ground me. And personally, when I drink kava, because I drink kava nearly daily as well, and those 15 minutes of preparing kava,
very good point.
Man, it is my moment of zen.
Yes.
Yes.
You bring up a very good point.
Yeah, the whole day can be crazy, right? But that 15 minutes is the 15 minutes where nothing distracts me.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because the preparation, you know, a lot of people say, oh, I want something instant. I want something to take off the shelf. But the preparation, obviously, you know, that's like itself a meditation. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
And that's exactly how I treat it. And you know, when people ask me, you know, we sell easier forms of kava, right, to prepare, because I think people are nervous about it. They're worried that they won't be able to prepare it properly, which is really a shame, because it's not difficult, and it's very, I think, central to kava, because you can't really understand kava without understanding A, where it came from, B, how it's actually prepared.
Interesting that it's very interesting you brought that up, because our colleague, the guy I've been a colleague with since, you know, over a decade now, is CX.
Mm-hmm.
He used to be University of Minnesota, now University of Florida, doing all the cutting edge kava prevents cancer research. He, in the early days of his research, and I started corresponding, and he sent twice Amanda Martin, C.C. Martin, who was his graduate student, out here. And she lived in my little house down there, weeks at a time. And he had her learn how to make fresh ava. And I really thought that was commendable, considering, you know, he does this cutting edge research. He might be using, now I think he's using more traditional, but, you know, he's using extracts, mm-hmm. He's using cavalactone and so forth, but he wanted somebody that he worked with to really get to know that plant. And she made 2 trips out here. Once she stayed like a month, you know, and really got to know fresh ava.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In some ways, we're talking about the consciousness of a plant, and whether it's dried or whether it's fresh, I think that's still there. And I do think that there is something to the
the idea that you're taking the time to farm it, to propagate it, to keep it healthy and safe, and you're still taking the time to treat it properly right before you drink it, right?
Good point. And you know your cultivars too. That's also kind of important.
Yeah.
Sometimes I wonder, if you drink it and you don't know what you're drinking, it's good to know what you're drinking.
Yeah, you know what to expect, right? It's like shaking someone's hand and you don't know the face of this person, right?
Yeah.
That'd be a very odd thing to do.
Well, it's another thing that different cultures are different, but I think there are some that are less prone to knowing the exact cultivar that they're drinking.
Yes, certainly.
And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but it's not for me. I want to know.
I agree.
I want to know what I'm drinking. And I will say, I stopped drinking Nene for a long time. And about 2 weeks ago, I started just supplementing with my regular Ava drinking a little bit of his Nene. And there ain't no question about it. Nene helps you sleep.
It's great.
It does. More than just about anything, any other Ava. I mean, it doesn't put you to sleep, but when you do go to sleep, it's definitely better.
Yeah.
So I had a control group there where I stopped it for a long time, and I sleep great, but not like Nene.
And Nene historically was used for
the
children.
upset children. Yep.
So it would help them with teething, on their gums, and it would also help them to sleep.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. So obviously, these people knew a heck of a lot.